G'day traders, welcome to wrap up of Tuesday the 14th of August. So on the daily charts here, we're still hanging up around these highs. Again, it's sort of a little bit hard to get a really good gauge of what's going on because all it looks like is it's sort of this bit of a blob of market, of price, I suppose, and there's not a lot as far as support resistance. It's a bit too much of a longer term time frame. I've said this quite a bit. This daily chart's fantastic when it's reacting to these levels that are predetermined. But at the moment, while it's up around here, it's hard to get a good gauge of what's going on. But certainly in the medium term, so these 15-minute charts, which just pop over here now and have a bit of a chat about for a second, because there's some real significant things that happen on this chart, and say it time and time again, but it's a fantastic link up between the short term and the long term markets. Now I've got lines all over these. I'm just looking at trend lines, and basically got trend lines as vertical support and resistance, and then I've got the horizontal support and resistance through actual price. But again, you got to draw on here and make it. Again, it's got to be systematic, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Is do anything with a systematic approach. Some people this might look like a bit of a mess. For me, it's telling me exactly what the market's doing on a little bit of a longer term, and I really use this for ideas of more to do with exits and where I believe a potentially trading area can head to. Now, something that's very significant is this line here and this line here. Okay, so this one here, I've just got it at the moment. You can see it's not a significant trend line. It's just basically drawing it across the tops there. It's just providing a bit of a gauge for me, a bit of a guide. So I wouldn't place a lot of emphasis on this. This trend line here I've had in for a long time, and I look across, and all of a sudden the 15-minute charts, in an area where, and we'll talk about it, there was a 5-minute fade that came up to buy. It was potentially a good area, but once it failed, there was a major rejection off this trend line here. It became quite significant. These markets are coming down and having a look at breaking through this support area here. But in saying that, this support level, if you go back through, the market has sort of had this sideways range where the market just could not get above this level with any sort of power. Eventually we got through it, we've bounced off it, and then we've bounced off it quite a few times. And in this cash market, we probably bounced off this 1403 level 4 or 5 times, and it's just proving to be significant. So what I was looking for in the afternoon, basically, if we start breaking that area, it's real potential to let the floodgates open. It's an area that should hold, but the more and more an area holds, that once it eventually breaks, there's a lot more chance of an absolute, a strong push through. So two very key areas of watching, that area there, for support, meaning that not looking to take any sort of sell trade underneath that area until we get some sort of confirmation that they're going to go through. And then this trend line here, that just once we saw the market react almost to the tick to it and push off it, that was sort of that power, that momentum to potentially get through where it's eventually broken here. Righto, so 5-minute charts. Again, looking at this 1403 region, it's sort of this 5-minute fade came up right where there's a bit of support. So in the end, I think it's eventually worked, but it's a tough one to take, just because what was happening here, the markets were, you can see these long wicks as well. The markets was really just, every time we'd come down in here, it's just bouncing it straight back up. And the Nasdaq really supported this too. The Nasdaq was coming back right up into its range, and it actually, as this fade signaled, the Nasdaq was right up near its highs, trying to make a higher high. So definitely a tough one to look at as far as any selling opportunities in this regards. You just look like the market was trying to go higher. Eventually they've pushed up, they've gone higher here. This 5-minute fade, even though it's failed, it's quite a good area. It's an area where it's potentially could have got a lot higher. There's a good bit of support here at 1405.50. What's happened is you can see this sideways, or this range here. The market's pushed through, got above it. So what it's going to do is potentially, if the upside has got some strength, is come back and use the top of this range as a support and an area to launch it from itself to go higher. Okay, so what happens is the fade formed this bit of a pivot here. It started to really break to the upside, looked like it had a lot of potential was going to go, but then all of a sudden it swung round, and this is where it really bounced off that trend line on the 15-minute chart. So on the side of my charts, I've always got the 15-minute chart showing, so I got a little bit of a medium term or longer term view, and I'm seeing this pressure on the downside and seeing all the other markets just turn with some power, and all of a sudden breaking through this pivot level became very obvious or apparent that it was going to go and head lower. Not necessarily break these 1403 levels yet, but at least get a bit of a short-term burst to the downside. Then through this period here, we had quite a slow afternoon. We really stuck within about a 2-point range. But if you're using key levels and watching key levels, there was always potentially a downside coming around here. So 14.0250 was the gap. So that was a key level as well, just watching the market, couldn't really get through that. And also, of course, that 14.03 level I'm talking about. So this is this real zone of support. But we're seeing this great resistance up here as well. So what's going to happen is once the market's down underneath it like it has here, comes back, uses resistance, and then it's going to potentially really start to sell off from. And that's where that's what's happened here. So, you know, quite a predictable area in that it eventually has broken, comes back, uses it almost to the ticker as a resistance again, and then from there it's had a real push down, and we're continuing to push lower at the moment. So 1 minute charts, I think the 5 minute chart shows price action best today. Because we're in such a tight range, it was tough to get some real solid formations as far as, you know, continuations with power points or anything like that. We're not getting multiple power points in a row, but again, it's this support area here, which is, you can see with a closer term view here. Look on the 1 minute chart, it's bounced off it. You know, Nasdaq, a few other markets really getting a bounce off that area there, so showed, you know, momentum on the upside for the time being. This is where it's pushed up and got above that sideways range. Could potentially use it as support here to go higher. So you can see it's got a real burst to the upside there. So it did look like it's potentially going to go to the highs, but right here, all the other markets turned around and turned around some real pace. It was about a couple of minutes earlier, the Nasdaq really started to break downside. I was watching it here while this potential fading area was still sort of up round here. The Nasdaq had already well and truly broken its pivots, and it was a bad sign for anything as far as any buying opportunity here. It looked like there was certainly some pressure coming on the downside. You know, that's eventually where it's come through. We've got down, we've really hung around this support, and you can see very slow afternoon, really just sticking within a very tight range. But then, so that line there is just where that gap was. Then we've got underneath the gap, use it as resistance, and that's where we've gone lower from. So, you know, what I'd say about today is tight range. You know, not a massive amount of movement, but still some very at times predictable areas, and you know, still some fantastic trading opportunities as well. So even though it's slower markets, there's likely that we're going to be taking less trades, but doesn't mean there isn't still good trading opportunities, you know, most days. That's a wrap up for Tuesday, and we'll be back on Wednesday.